Tracey, you often go into these hard topics with your work, and you are famous for not being scared to deal with the trickier questions that are affecting, social life, ideas of identity and so on. So how resonant was this theme to you, the idea of, a sense of a collective, the stronger we become?
I'm not big on fulfilling sort of the thematic kind of parameters of curators or directors or whoever, and it's not, the work doesn't come from those places. The work is, art is a calling to me. It's not a job. It's not my life. It's my calling. It's, if I don't make an artwork a day, I die. So when the particular work, I can't really speak about it because I don't want to kind of kill the magic of it, because it's still it hasn't. It hasn't.
It's been born.
Well, it's kind of birthing, and it's kind of, but it needs a bit of help, It needs like a midwifery kind of process, and proper kind of, state of the art facilities.
Hint, hint.
Oh yeah, no, we still gonna have a conversation. And for me, the thing was, how do you take back? Because I was kind of like, I'm not gonna, I can't go back to this repetition of speaking of identity politics, racial supremacy, Like, how do you go back to the source, or to the core, to the root, how do you start like digging open, opening the wound? How do you like dig in the ground and like, see what's down there, like, and I was, what it took me to was kind of the space that is, and when I say this, I say this very kind of loosely, sort of a prehistorical space, which is non-linear and governed by sort of white supremacist sort of normative, value systems. It's not, the sort of white history we've all grown up in. It's not. It's like, how do I find the information, the oral histories that have been erased, that haven't been documented, that haven't. Do I wait for the things to come in dreams? Do I wait for, like, what am I? So the actual cause, I can say very loosely, is looking at Black presence in Europe. Pre-colonialism, pre-slavery, when was that golden period when there was this communication between the continents, all the shit they lied about, all the stuff they haven't put in the history books, all the stuff about the, that talks about the exchange of knowledge, that talks about, African innovation in not just in Europe, but in Asia, in all of these different places. So that's what I'm like trying to kind of overstep what I think is a sort of current or contemporary kind of issue, but also an amnesia of what happened in a historical kind of space that's never been acknowledged, that that is swept under the carpet. And I think that's where we find our power, in that space. When you hear that. You're talking about African Americans, when you hear that it was an African American man who invented peanut butter, 101 ways with peanut butter, George Carver Washington Jr., and you're like, huh? And then you hear about the African American man who was instrumental in, developing a component in the first car, and like all of these things that just get, and it's like, I'm not here to give a history lesson. You can go to a book to find that. I'm here to give you a holistic experience of what it is that is missing, Yeah. And it's, I had my gallerist in New York years ago. He said to me, you don't make art for the present, you make it for the future. And I'm only understanding that now, looking back like 10, 20 years of what I've been doing and how stuff that I did earlier has become relevant,
Yeah. Mawande, how important for you is this idea of a collective move towards, getting stronger, this theme, the stronger we become? How, tell me about what...
Should I use an X or an AK-47?
Yeah. Chop it.
The idea of going back to the source, it's very important. And I think we are so caught up in European concepts. Like the word discourse is problematic. It monopolizes the understanding of creation, of creativity, like we all create same visions, visualities, images, that are consumed by the outside. But these are visions or visualities that they can identify with. I've realized that it's difficult to create from the source because we are so caught up in this other discourse that has nothing to do with us and our thinking. And it's something that is perpetuated within the art world. I respect the invite from Nkule because as someone that I knew, and also Nomusa, because people that I've worked with in the past, that as people who have visions, you know, and there's something that they've seen within my practice. The important thing is I wanted to jump into is the idea of spirituality. We don't talk about that, you know, when we talk about art, you know, as something that is universal, you know, something that create, that is behind, you know, the building of industries. You know, it seems so alien in the art world to talk of spirituality. We talk about it in a very loose way. You know, I've always been thinking about the word visualizing, you know. What does that mean in art discourse? Visualizing, you know. But people who are creating empires, they talk about visualizing, you know. But we are the people who should be talking about visualizing even more, you know, because we are creators, we are inventors, you know. But I think the kind of education that we have does not afford us, you know, to think in a certain way. So in order for me to create an authentic work that is inspired by where I come from, my own modality, I have to transcend all these loopholes, you know, and they're not easy to transcend because sometimes you might create something that is not fashionable, that is not accepted by general art market, and so therefore you're gonna starve for some time.
Oh yeah. Long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I happen to represent my country, I want to represent my country fully and honestly. You know, creating from the source, going to Eastern Cape, to my place of birth, and sourcing material from that place. And there's a deeper meaning behind that. Me sourcing material and introducing this material to the world, you know. So I think that's where I will end. No chopping.
There's just one more thing I wanted to say about the theme and the way that we, you know, what we mean by it.
Yeah.
The notion of social resilience is often sort of taken as this, you know, we can do it no matter what. But I think the way that we mean it is that we're looking at it in relation to social resistance as well, is that people have had to go through harsh conditions and there's the expectations that they'll just carry on doing so. And what we're saying is actually, it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't be the norm. And when you were talking, I was actually thinking I've always been inspired by a story that you told me a long time ago where you said there was you were expected to complete an assignment where you had to look outside your window and tell us what you see. You know, this is the thing, the local, the global. But this was sort of a very simple image where you're standing, look outside your window and tell us what you see and tell us if you can find a picture of the sublime. Yes. And you so beautifully put it in this way, and you said, there's no ways you can have someone sitting in a house and looking outside the window and what they see is mountain and sea and garden and swimming pool. And then you have another person looks outside their window and the next thing they see immediately is the corrugated sheet of the next shack. So there's a sort of disjuncture in the way that we sort of seem to understand these worlds, right? And the way that we have this perception about what it is we're meant to do as artists, what it is we're meant to do as curators, what it is we're meant to do as thinkers. And also in the way that we see ourselves in relation to the outside world. And so this idea that, you know, we're going to go and display something, you know, that somehow, shows the sublime. in reality, it's the points that you're saying. It's in the rest of the world, there seems to be this decline in pursuing matters of social justice. It seems to be a going backwards in conservatism.